something. There we go. Let's try that again. All of a sudden, I got a little pop-up that my mic was muted. What's going on, everybody? As I was saying, welcome to the show. Very late starting. We're going to talk fast through this one. I'm going to have us out of here by like 6:15, whoever shows up. So it looks like a handful of people here in the chat. Appreciate you guys. As I was saying on mute there, it's been too long since I've done a show, like a week and change. It's just been too hectic, too much to keep up with. Early in the season, got to help the model a little bit more than like later on when we've got some rates locked in. We know what roles look like, and it's just like major changes. Early on, more tweaks to make. So it's just taking really long in the afternoons for me to get things, really squared away when they need to be. And I've just missed out on doing some shows. But figured today, nothing changed at 5:30. I had things like set up here. Every day I've done this dashboard, and every day I failed to get on the show. But we're going to jump in here, talk for about a half hour and go through these just positions, the various exposures against the field like we normally do. And just figured, this one's for you guys. I wanted to be here and at least try and reset the pace and still struggling to get this thing earlier in the day. But let's take a quick look. A handful of games, one extra game on the FanDuel slate. They included the late one. As of the last time I looked, Lakers Hornets. Lakers favored by 8.5 on the road, 231.5 point total there. Definitely some pieces and parts at worst out of that one. We just found out that Austin Reeves is active. He was questionable earlier. Washington Wizards at the Pistons. Pistons favored by 11.5. No surprise, but a 235.5 point total at least puts that one on the radar. Some value pieces out of the Wizards side, maybe some Pistons, just upside pieces. Cade, Duran, etc. Portland at Orlando. Orlando favored by 2.5 against that good defensive Portland squad. 236.5 point total. Looks pretty decent. I'm kind of surprised that total's as high as it is for those two teams. It's pretty solid one. We'll see where they came up. Cleveland and Miami, 8-point spread, 247.5 point total. That's a potential beast. Getting some of the key Cleveland guys. Just had to mute Darius Garland a little bit. I just noticed that his rate was too high in the first version of projections, so brought him down, reran the FanDuel sim before, and we're kind of where we need to be. He wasn't coming up at all because he's just like 1,000 more on DraftKings. We'll get into him in a sec. San Antonio and at Chicago. San Antonio favored by 4 on the road. Another healthy total, 237 in that one. Definitely pieces and parts at worst from that game. The Bucks and the Mavs, 2-point spread favoring the Bucks on the road, 230 point total. Kind of low end, but obviously some major upside stars in a couple parts of that game. New Orleans at Phoenix, 8.5 point spread favoring Phoenix at home. Low end, 226 point total. Second lowest on the slate. The Clippers and Hawks game that's only on FanDuel is the lowest. So this is your low point on DraftKings. The Suns are favored by 8.5 in a home game. They're just low end totals, and a lot of guys missing on the Pele side. Minnesota at Utah, 7.5 point spread favoring Minnesota, obviously on the road, 234.5 points there. And then we round things out on FanDuel with that Hawks Clippers game. The Clips favored by 4.5, 220.5 point total in that one. So kind of ugly. That game's up here. We are getting some pieces of it on the FanDuel side. Just to talk that through real quick, it's that handful of guys. These guys level with the field between 15 and 20%. That's KP, that's Zubac, that's Chris Dunn. Up at the top, John Collins comes up a little bit. I feel like he's just getting a little under projected for the numbers that he's put up so far early on in the season. It's a 28-minute projection, nothing beyond what he's been doing. He's playing 28 a night. As you can see, put up 29 FanDuel points in 28 minutes the last time out. I've got him at 27 and change, 5.72 value score. We're getting him gently above the field, 36% in our top 150. But that's the most highly exposed guy from that late game on FanDuel, and that's also our biggest above the field stand. And then we're below the field on the Harden play on FanDuel, pretty notably so. He's up in like the 40s on the projections that we ran this against as far as ownership on FanDuel. So just note there, we're getting like half the James Harden that they're calling for the field. I think they're another 2 points out ahead of me, giving James credit for a little bit of additional rate. I don't love that. So I think we're pretty stable with where we're at with Harden. Maybe he picks up, if I bump him to 36th minute, maybe that makes up the difference. Kind of cheat it that way. But I think we're okay there. I just don't like the field having a 40% owned play at Harden's level in the late game and not having all that much of it. You know what I mean? But 20%, it's not like we have nothing. But just be aware of that one if you're running these. Otherwise, nobody really all that relevant. Just onesie-twosie shares on anybody. Jalen Johnson. Zubac, 14%. A little bit of Derek Jones in there. Nobody else overly relevant. Jumping to the one that we are shared between. By the way, hello, everybody out there. Sam's here. OMG Father. Beyond the Rabbit Hole. Good to see you guys. Anybody do well in football over the weekend? I like a break-even kind of weekend, a little bit down actually in the 20 lineups that I ran. First one, though, in that 20 lineup FanDuel contest of the year that I haven't at least broken even. That contest was great. They took away the top half payout. They took away the big prize pool, and it's, kind of winnowed it down in quality for a while there. It was my favorite contest that they've set up. Didn't spike any big winners, but just consistent, like easy to cash tournament, easy to profit from tournament. So that was nice to have, but dipped a little bit this weekend. Not my best weekend of football, but I think that was kind of the consensus about this weekend. A lot of weird scores. But hopefully you guys did well there. Anybody spiking anything in basketball? Basketball's been on. We've had people cashing, doing nice in the Discord. So share those screenshots when you do well. Had some nice wins. Need the big one to come through. My season up and down to start, as usual. So Ronnie Holland, a little bit of an outlier. I told you some of these Detroit and Washington pieces are going to come up. Holland, 59% exposed on the FanDuel slate, a 6.08 value score. 6.46 value score on DraftKings is massive, especially for a player like Ron Holland. He's coming up at 76%. That is aggressively above the field. Same thing on Oscar Thompson. He's coming up aggressively above the field at 54% on DraftKings. It's just a pushover type of a game. On the Detroit side, you can see either of those guys standing pretty tall in this one. 0.81 per minute so far this season out of Holland, 1.07 out of Oscar Thompson. Plenty of upside there. You can mute those a little bit. They might come down, a guy like Holland, maybe we come down, if I take a minute or two away from the 30 that I've got him at, and he's been playing those, and there's no Tobias Harris coming back. So you could mute those a little bit. But no matter what you do, these guys are going to come up fairly critical. What we're seeing here is just the difference between where we're getting them and where the field's getting them, and that's where we create our advantages. So both those players in play for me. Anthony Edwards, a little bit different across sites, getting him nearly 50% in lineups on the DraftKings slate. He's only 8,600 over there. I'll take that against Utah. I have him at 34 minutes. He's been injured, but it's Utah. As long as he's out there, fire away. Sam, not sure. Can I provide a link to all the column headers as far as like what you're looking at here on the screen? Let me know what you mean there, Sam, before I spend time. Just to do it real quick. FanDuel data's over here. DraftKings data's over here on the right. So it's by where it's blue and where it's green, if the whole screen's up here. And then what we've got here is our projection, value score, where we are relative to the field ownership that this ran, plus our exposure in our top 150 coming out of the sim. So that's like how this number differs from the field. So here we're gently over, here we're way over. So the field's probably 45, 50% there. The field's probably like 25% on that one. Same deal over here on DK. And then we've just got various stats. This is point per minute stuff that I'll refer to. This is, just scoring stuff and rebound rates, assist rates, 3 points, and things like that. But the things to really care about are the details in here. Just depends on which site you play on as far as which side you're looking at. If you meant something else, let me know. Bucket's full of Ant. Sounds good to me on the DraftKings slate. If he's out there for them, he's going to be out there for me. I have no issues with that. 16% level with the field on FanDuel because he's 9,400. You only got a 4.7 value on him over there, so not really all that critical of the FanDuel slate. You do get a little bit of Jeremiah Fears over there, a little bit more on the DraftKings board at 5,100 versus the 54 FanDuel is asking. Just a minor discrepancies, 0.94, 0.95 across sites as far as what he's done so far. Got him in for 28 minutes today, played 31 the last time out, so there is a little bit of additional upside, a little bit of ceiling that you could squeeze out of that one potentially. Anthony Black stepping into the starting group, 34%, a little bit above the field at 4,700 on DraftKings, coming up level with the field and only 3% on FanDuel because he's 53. That's a $600 site-to-site price difference relative to the cap. So a little bit different of a play, just kind of to take some of the top end of the board off. Let me sort this down by positions, and we'll look in some of the key guys at each spot. You know what? Since we don't care about these FanDuel guys, I did FanDuel already, right? If you care about the FanDuel game, I ran it down. It's just those guys up at the top there. Let me cut this by DraftKings positions just because it's better that way. There we go. All right, 553. Plenty of time. All right, so Ant and Fierce, the two most highly exposed. Again, love the idea of getting to Ant above the field. If you want to bring it down a little bit, maybe you cut it down to 40-ish%, take 10 off the top, and you're still probably, more this kind of trajectory above the field. You're probably, 10, 15 points clear of the field rather than probably about 20 there. But I like that spot. Anthony Edwards, what's not to like? Austin Reeves also coming up quite a bit against the field. Same thing on FanDuel for Reeves, 43% over there. One of our biggest outliers, biggest at the guard position on the FanDuel slate. 5.20 value score looks pretty good. We're looking for 5 on FanDuel, 5.35 on DraftKings. We're looking for 5.5, but nobody's reaching that at the guards among guard eligible players. So that works perfectly. That's an upside player. He's played this season so far at 1.43 per minute. Some of that came with Luka out. Some of that, is obviously playing a little bit above his head. He was 1.07 on DraftKings last year. I do not think that he actually made that kind of a leap. It's still a small sample, but he's obviously taken it up a notch, and they're going up against Charlotte. That's a monster potential spot. So love that. We know that he's going to play too. Darren Fox didn't come up at all at 8,000 on the FanDuel slate. He is 6,900 at point guard on DraftKings. That's a critical play. 28% exposed above the field. Wouldn't mind grabbing a little bit more. That's just cheap for a good player. 1.17 per minute last year, 1.12 so far this year in a very small sample. Was he played 1, 2? Well, last time out played 30 and a half minutes. I've got him in for 32. You would expect the potential uptick as long as they saw him just go out there and play essentially 31. So giving him the additional minute I think is fine. Like the spot here against Chicago. Des Bane, 11% below the field FanDuel, 26%, but still below the field on DraftKings is kind of interesting. 6,100 over there. Had a good one and has played a couple of decent games of memory serves recently. Last time out was, last time out I'm wrong, 35 minutes, 23 FanDuel points. So it must have been a couple back that he actually had the decent one. I just don't love this game. As much as it's projecting in the 130s, I think it's more grindy than that. I think it's more a defensively oriented game than that. And I certainly don't really seeing it trending in Des Bane's direction. Played this year so far at 0.89, 119 last year, but a different team, a different role. Like, I don't love that. And I'm glad we're a little bit below the field while still having some. If you want to take a little bit more on FanDuel, juice it to 15%. Probably wouldn't go north of 20. Lonzo, not really relevant on FanDuel, 1 share across 150, but at 4,100 on DraftKings, we got some of them, and that it makes sense just coming out of how that Cleveland and Miami game is totaled. 14% level with the field. He's right on a 506 value score, so reasonable play from just kind of the cheap mid-range, if that makes sense. Mid-range of exposure, mid-range of value, but cheap. IO mix and match play, we got him 8%, Devo 8%, CJ McCollum 8% on DraftKings. A little bit more of Devo, 25-ish% level with the field on FanDuel makes sense. 57 over there versus 6,000, shooting guard and point guard eligible as well. Same thing with CJ, multi-position. We only got him 5% FanDuel though, actually less, but that's level with the field where we were undercutting the field on DraftKings. Trey Jones, 10% level with the field, shooting guard, point guard for 57 on FanDuel. Little bit below at 8,000. You can see there is a slight difference in the value scores. They just function differently. 493 when we're looking for 5 is better than 5 when we're looking for 5.5, just slightly. Grayson Allen below the field. I think this is a product of me being 2 or 3 points below where the place that creates the ownership projections had him. I just don't see it. I've got him basically playing like he is, and it just doesn't really come up that much. And it's a player I feel like we've been over on a little bit early in the season. So I'm glad for that kind of course correction here against the ownership through the projections. Keontae George, decent upside at 7,100 for 32 minutes, but only a 4.63, realistic score. 112 per minute versus 0.94, 116 versus 1.0. Which one's the real story? I kind of middled it. You can get a little bit better than what we're looking at here. I don't mind having a few shares, but I wouldn't get excited. On DraftKings, he's 7.3% and below the field. If you're with the field on a player like that, 10-ish%, it's not harmful, it's inoffensive, and you're there if he gets there, but I'd probably rather be a sliver below. Either way, though, you're 7% and below here versus 12% and with, not a gigantic difference. I'm surprised to not see that much Cade. We got a lot more of them on FanDuel. 10-4 on the FanDuel slate versus 10-5 on the DraftKings board. Just 6% over here. Below the field, that's still a 5.14 value score. I feel like you probably just lost some ground because we're giving some money to like the Austin Reeves play there. We're giving a little bit of money through guard at $8,600 Ant. So maybe it's just slicing that available money to get those Cade shares down a little bit. And like those guys are at significantly better value scores. So the sim's going to consider them a little bit more important through the process. But obviously, this is a monster upside potential player for 10-5, 10-4 over on FanDuel. You got him 20%, 6.6. I wouldn't mind spiking that a little bit, get to 12, 15, somewhere around that territory. 1.34 per minute this year, 1.42 last year. Tremendous per minute guy, one of the better on the board. Zion James, just a mixer on both sides. Level with the field at 1 on FanDuel, 6% on DraftKings, level with the field. Luka did not get Luka on FanDuel. He's 13,000. That explains why. 1.79 per minute this year versus 1.48 last year, 1.85 versus 1.53. Obviously has been completely out of his mind. Going up against Charlotte, that's a 36-minute projection. This is my issue. He's projected over 60 on DK. He's projected at almost 60 on FanDuel, and he's not coming up because of that price and the way it's bouncing off the slate. 12,000 on DraftKings, we got him, but not a ton, 6%. If you can find ways to build quality lineups that utilize these guys and are competitive with the field in Sims, and you can get yourself to a higher share of Luka, go for it. Nothing at all wrong with having more Luka Doncic. It's just not coming up by the numbers in the knapsack. Trey Johnson, 11%. He's a 5.64 value on FanDuel. He's a 4.8 value on DraftKings. 4,200 versus 4,600 on the relative cap. Multi-position on both sites. Got him 5% still on DK, but below the field pretty significantly. Just level with the field on the FanDuel side. I'm fine with that. I don't love that spot for him going up against Detroit, but he's going to get some minutes playing at 0.75. Those are guys that I'm fine with sacrificing to the field sometimes. The uninspiring 0.75 guys, the 0.65 Dylan Brooksy types, although Dylan Brooks has been better than that this year. He's in here somewhere. Limited sample so far. Other noteworthy guys and some differentiated players more on the FanDuel side here. 14% below the field on Drew. 17% level with the field on Josh Giddey, who could have a decent day. 35 minutes, 9,600. Those are just kind of fair price, fair projection on Giddey. Where we are, though, below 3%, pretty hard undercut to the field at 4.74 value on DK for 9,700. Little bit different of a play on DraftKings. Could definitely hit ceiling and exceed that. Been playing very, very well at 1.44, showing some improvement from the 1.27 from last year. FanDuel 139 versus 125. Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, obviously fantastic players with plenty of ceiling. 128, 142 per minute, respectively. 9,600 for the guy putting up 128 versus 9,200 for the guy putting up 1.42. Just a little bit of a price wrinkle there as far as this year's performance, but they're 116, 130 last year. I was going to say they're a little bit closer, but even last year, if you're looking at those numbers, there is separation there between the two. So I'm kind of happy to be above the field, level with the field, but at 26%. So above the Devin Booker exposure, I should say, in that great game environment for Donovan Mitchell. And then over here, we're slightly below the field. It looks like we're a little closer to the field on Mitchell than we are on Booker. I would probably look to goose this one a little bit. And if you do it just at the expense of that one to double this, bring this one up to the field, I think that's perfectly fine. Either way, you're not exactly breaking the bank on shares of either of those guys. Could hit ceiling on either one. Again, though, just given the differences in the game environments, that Cavs Heat game is at a 247.5 point total. I didn't fat finger that, right? That is the actual total there. Let's see if that's changed. It's coming down by a point, 246.5 now. Not really a relevant factor there. So if you just need a tie break, go to the guy in the bigger game environment. The explosive, one of the bigger totals we've seen this season. Colin Sexton, 17% below the field, 6% of Trey Murphy, 18% of Con Knipple. Just one share of them in 150 at 6,300 on DraftKings. A little bit different price. 6,000 against the FanDuel cap works a little bit better. You can see he's over our value mark at 5.12. Level with the field kind of makes sense over there. He's coming off a 48-point game in 40 minutes the last time out. 48 FanDuel points. 3%, 1% on Cooper Flagg, Norm Powell, guys who've been playing fairly well and coming up in lineups. Not really so much today on FanDuel. Onesie, twosie shares of all these guys on DraftKings. The only other relevant guy hiding down here, Isaiah Collier, 17%, but below the field. Again, 5.29. We are above the value threshold on Collier. 26 minutes. He returned, played 26 and change. I put him back at 26, 4,200. Yeah, 0.87 per minute guy last year on league average usage around 18%. I think we can ignore the 0.40 that he played that one game at, put up 10 and a half fantasy points. Obviously, you're just getting back. Maybe you can low end him a little bit on the number, And 0.87, I'm right around that, I estimate. I can actually look in the other file, but it'll take too long. 603, let's get to forwards. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe for the little pop-up show here. Making an effort to get on the air. Concerted effort to get this show earlier in the day. Rabbit Hole, didn't see Micah Peavy's name pop up there. Because he's shooting guard and small forward on DK. Shooting guard only on FanDuel. I've got him at 18 minutes. Didn't really make an impact. Got into one share on DK. He's only 3,200. It's 3,600 on the FanDuel slate. Let me see. A little light on him. If anything, it looks like I'm high on him. At least versus the projections that the ownership ran on. Let's see if they changed anything. Yeah, so this sim ran against ownership that had him significantly undercut from where I've got him in these projections for 18 minutes and 14 points, handful. And we did get one share of him on DraftKings, but it's not like he's at a significant value number, even though he's 32. Now, obviously, if you make this 18 fantasy points, that's a major difference, right? That thrusts him well above our point per minute threshold that we're looking for. He would be one of the value chalk pieces of the day at that number. I've got him 0.73 right now. You could give him 0.75. You can even move him up to like 0.8. And I just don't think you're going to get him to that territory. Like, you'd have to give him a point per minute essentially to get him to the value I demonstrated there. If you give him 0.8, you're call it like 14 fantasy points, it's not going to make a huge difference. And I don't think there's that much reason to really push him up the board. It's also just like a lowish end game environment, that 226 point total. They're 8.5 point dogs. Phoenix is kind of middle of the road defensively, 115 rating. That would be one where, again, if you give him a few more points, he will start to shoot up the value board. As is right now, I don't have it. Keep an eye on it, though. You see it change. If you see him go above, let's say, 16 points, probably starts to at least get into some lineups, if nothing else. Again, we're here. If we had him at 16, that would put him on point with a 5 at 3,200. So say he would be maybe slightly better than like a Simone Fontecchio for 300 more. And slightly is the wrong word. A little bit better than that. 10, 12% maybe. Still probably not a slate breaker. And that's only if you saw him get to that kind of a extra projection. All right, so again, among forwards, Ronnie Holland, Aja Thompson coming up near the top of the board. We did talk about that earlier in the show. Aja is the guy that I would be much more interested in getting to. Ronnie Holland has played fairly well, though, 0.90 per minute on DK. That's up from 0.81 last year. I don't know that I would want a player like that all the way up there, but 4,300, he's just a building block piece. Both forward spots kind of just fits in and makes things work. So I think no matter how you slice it, you're going to get a lot. 59% above the field on FanDuel, more gently so. Same thing with Aja Thompson. 55% of Aja on the DraftKings slate, though, looks pretty good. 6,500, a little bit differentiated as far as that salary goes versus the cap. 1.09 per minute this year versus 1.07 last year. Just looking good. 30 minutes, whenever you give Anthony Black minutes, tends to deliver. 0.87 per minute last year, 0.84 so far this year, 0.8385 on DraftKings. We got him 34% on DK, 536 value score at the 4,700 shooting guard and small forward. Point guard, shooting guard on the FanDuel board. We got him just 3%, but definitely very, very playable. Sadiq Bey on FanDuel, just a mixer at 15% level with the field. A little bit below the field while getting a larger raw sample of them, 21% in our lineups in our top 150. That's below the field on DK. So a little bit noteworthy difference there. Herb Jones, same deal, 19% below the field DK, 31% level with the field on FanDuel. That's at a 549 value score. So we do get a little bit of value on Herb Jones in 34 minutes out of that New Orleans Phoenix game. You take 2 minutes away from him, though, we dip below the field. That's a 0.77 per minute, 0.73 this year per minute player. You call it 0.75. Not a guy you really want to get too crazy about. Less likely to hit the ceiling than a lot of guys. Randall, just a mixer on the DK board, a little bit below the field, but still 16%, fairly healthy. Didn't get him at 4.50 for value on FanDuel. He's 8,900 on FanDuel. Power forward only versus 81, same position on the DraftKings board. Wiggins, both forward spots on FanDuel. We got him, but below the field, just 9%, 4.91 value score. That's getting him right around a point per minute. Maybe that's shortchanging him a little, but that's who he is. Healthy game environment, though. Maybe I owe him a point or so. Because again, I do really like how that game looks. I might be like a little light on him, on Norm, and on Kez. I'm going to give those guys a look just because of how they're coming up. I think a little bit more of Wiggins might be justified in that game environment. Just to take an additional stake in it. They're also owned by the field. 14%, a little bit below the field. It's a closer issue on the DraftKings board. 6,800 over there. Or, excuse me. 6,800. Markkanen, mixer on both sides, but a lot more of them. Level with the field at 30% on FanDuel. 5.12 value gets him there. 13% on the DraftKings board. A 5.12 value score on the DK slate as well at 8,000. Solid mixer, power forward only, though. A little less flexibility. Javonte Green, light ownership and below the field FanDuel, 12% hard undercut to the field at 37 on the DraftKings board. That is a 5.10 value, though. We're home on the value on that one. That's a 0.69 per minute player, though. Again, just a guy you don't really love getting too excited about. He comes up, he's a building block, he slots in, other guys stand tall on top of him, but it's not a guy that you really want to rely on too much when he's coming up like this below the field. Let the field have that additional 15% on a guy like that. Spread it out to some of the other value guys where we're getting above the field. Giannis at 6%, little undercut to the field, 11% on DraftKings for 11.7. Different pricing relative to the cap. 4.86 value score on FanDuel, 5.21 on DraftKings. A little bit better looking on DraftKings, but definitely happy to have shares of Giannis playing at 1.90 per minute on DK, scoring 1.69 last year. Monster uptick. Obviously, we're not going to stay at that number all year long. Or maybe it's not obvious. I don't think we're going to stay at that number all year long, but it's going to be a monster number all year. So it's just anytime you can grab Giannis, like I was saying about Luka, extra shares of those guys is always fine. Just make sure that the rest of your lineup stays competitive. And those are the guys that, we're using guys like Javonte Green to pay up to get to. I think everybody gets that at this point. We talked about Io. We talked about Grayson Allen. Royce O'Neal, both forward spots, FanDuel 6%, 10% below the field, power forward only on DraftKings. Fine. Inoffensive, 0.88. 0.92 kind of a guy. Nothing really to get excited about with Royce O'Neal. Stable, solid minutes, though. Rock solid 30 minutes, 28, 29, 30 minutes, somewhere in that territory. Just not a guy who's going to really spike a ton of value or ceiling. He's just correctly priced. He's just Royce O'Neal all the time. Boncaro coming up just 16% level with the field at a decent FanDuel number. 47-point projection, 5+ value score. Just got him at 4% on the DraftKings slate. That's a gentle below the field undercut there, but it is a little bit below the field. I think 93, I'm happy to be here. If he was 89, something like that, and coming up like this, and he wouldn't be coming up like that, priced that way, but for argument's sake, then I'd be trying to advocate for getting above the field on him and changing this equation. But priced correctly here, 1.25 per minute down from 1.30 last year. I just think that's Paulo is who he is kind of a spot. So one for Tecchio, 5% undercut to the field on DK coming out of that good game. Denny and Tumani Kamara, mixers, undercut to the field, harder undercut on Denny than on Kamara. 6%, 5% undercut to the field on both guys on the DraftKings slate as well. Again, I'm just not that excited about that game. And that's not my excitement. That's, coming through the model here as well to get to these numbers. So, yeah, really not a big fan of that spot. Otherwise, onesie twosie shares on all these guys going down the board. Paulo we talked about, but that's one of your bigger stars in that group. AD, Miles Bridges, neither one of those guys coming up all that much. Either one of those guys could definitely go out there and have a game, though. On FanDuel, we got a little bit more of each of them, but nothing overly relevant. 18% of Nipple we already talked about. 16% on Paulo we already talked about. 14% of Dylan Brooks. I told you he was hiding in here somewhere. It's below the field. It's another guy, 0.72 per minute last year. This is who Dylan Brooks is. We know Dylan Brooks pretty well by now. He is not the 1.10 player that he's played at this year on the exact same usage. Like, if there was a reason that he was playing at that number, it's a small sample still. So just not a believer. Happy to be below the field. You can still have some when we do. 14% on DraftKings, non-issue, didn't come up at all. Nothing else down that way. And then putting the centers on the board. Last couple minutes here before I punch out and get things updated. Sure, everything has probably changed about this slate since I started talking, but that's all right. It does appear that we're getting a lot of our center exposure on FanDuel out of a multi-position guy who's not on the board. Well, no, actually, no. That's 72% there. So there is one big guy lurking who's not coming up here because he doesn't have center eligibility on the DraftKings slate. Who is that? Oh, maybe it was from that late game. Who is it? It's John Collins from the late game. So that rounds us out to, too much. So just bear that in mind. A chunk of your center ownership on FanDuel does look like it's going toward John Collins at the end of the night. 12% undercut to the field on Jalen Duren. I've got him at 30 minutes. I believe the site that the ownership ran against has him at like 34 minutes, which is pretty aggressive for Duren. Love him when he plays a ton of minutes. He's a monster as far as points per minute. 145 so far this year, 143 over on the DraftKings board. Just between the game, who they're playing against, and just his general nature of being a little bit spotty as far as minutes, I don't love giving him much more than a 30-minute projection. Give him 31, he comes up a little bit more, and so on. Just you can bounce him up as much as you'd like to, but it makes sense that he's undercut to the field. I still do like that spot. 5.47 value score on DraftKings, 5.26 on FanDuel. There's nothing about this that should be telling you that Jalen Duren is not a good play today. It's just coming up relative to massive ownership that they had him projected for as far as what we look at here. We got him 12% on FanDuel, 24% on DraftKings. Be at those numbers at your bottom, and if you want to take more, take more. Paul Reed coming up like a value. 16-minute projection. I didn't see that coming. 32% exposed on the other side of that same equation. 6 value score on DraftKings. That's aggressively above the field. Paul Reed's good per minute. I did not clock that he was at that low a DraftKings price. I probably have Paul Reed about a point and change too high. Paul Reed's going to come down in the update and be about there. Still a value. Maybe a little bit more tempered, probably more level with the field. No Stewart for Detroit. Yeah, I think this one comes back to earth a little bit while still being, again, probably like it'll look a lot like this. That 26 level with the field. That is a decent little piece of value. 16 minutes from a good per minute guy, 1.19 last year, 1.18 so far this year. The issue just arose, I had him at 1.24 accidentally. But again, it is a very good spot. There's no reason to think that Paul Reed couldn't play today at 1.24. I was kind of liberally giving 0.5, 0.1 additional per minute to some of these guys. Nurk just playing pretty well. 119, 116 per minute on FanDuel, 118, 117 last year on DraftKings. Just looks like Nurk out there. 9% below the field FanDuel, 26% level on DraftKings. No issues taking a little bit more Nurk. Going to need him, but it's not a great matchup for him, though, either, going up against Mini there. Got him at 27 minutes. He's been playing mostly 26-ish when he's getting the full run. So we're giving him a little bit of extra credit for them just wanting the body out, but they've also got some bodies to go through there. Jarrett Allen, fine. 9% FanDuel, 24% above the field. That's a 5.56 value on DraftKings, actually. 6,200 on value on DraftKings by value. That's an interesting piece on the DraftKings slate. 1.20 per minute this year. That's up from 1.13 last year. Cavs at full strength, but again, that game environment is just really, really strong looking based on how Vegas has it. So happy to have those shares of Jarrett Allen. If I could figure out how to get a little bit more on FanDuel at a 5.24 value, I might. That might be a trade-off for some of those John Collins shares. Mark Williams, Rudy Gobert, significant enough, 20%, 12% on the FanDuel slate, 15 and 10 on the DraftKings board, but below the field on both, while still getting both at pretty noteworthy value scores and higher value scores than some of those other guys. That's an interesting wrinkle. Lower value scores on the DraftKings board. I wonder why they came up lighter. Maybe just a product of how the Sim's handling the ownership and the ROI and everything there. That's interesting. You can see it, right? The two bigger numbers that those guys have versus everybody there that came up, and then I won't bother to add Collins, but Collins was in that mix as well. Alex Sarr, we got 10% of, 9.3, a little bit below the field. Another guy playing out of his mind so far. 1.42 per minute this year, up from 107 last year. 7,200, just not a great fit on this slate, and I don't love the spot for him, but obviously a very good player who could exceed expectation here. Filipowski, a couple shares, but below the field. Naz Reid, a couple shares below the field. Vooch, a couple shares below the field on all those guys. Vooch is the best player out of that group, but that is a generally strong group. 0.93, 1.03, 1.22 for fair prices on all of them. Miles Turner, below the field. That 1% is probably going up against like 8, 9% there. I'm fine being below the field. It's a 30-point projection for 6,100. You can get there. 29 minutes. If he goes to the 34 minutes, he can obviously produce value. 1.02 per minute this year, 105 last year. Just another spot. I'm not in love with that Milwaukee-Dallas game. Wemby coming up like some of the other big ticket stars. 2% below the field on FanDuel, 0 on DraftKings. Obviously, you can take more Wemby if you want. That said, putting a 159 per minute this year. That's down from 161 last year. Negligible difference year to year. 166 up from 164 on FanDuel from the different scoring. But it is noteworthy that he didn't, so far, take like any kind of statistical leap. He's just playing like the ridiculous player that he is. But I was expecting maybe a little bit more per minute to start out here. He's just fine for the money. I think the sites were too, based on how he's priced. And that's why he's not making a huge impact. But you get that any given slate game from Wemby and forget it. You're going to be shot in the foot without him. So any share of him is perfectly fine. A large portfolio of him is probably a mistake, if that makes sense. And then we got nobody below him on either site. No, we did get one share each of these guys. Who is that? Jovic, Portis, Diabate, Yves Misi. Good luck. Not much there. With that in mind, guys, 622 went a little bit OT. Giddy out. That's going to change the entire slate. That's fun. All right. Value coming from Chicago. Let me punch out and get that stuff updated. Look for this show, hopefully earlier in the day tomorrow. That is my goal. I might stay up all night to get it done. I might go to bed super early, wake up super. I don't know how I'm going to get it done, but look for this show earlier in the day tomorrow. I got to get my act together. You guys rock. Hit the like button. Subscribe to Roto Scouts when you get a chance. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. Share those results when you do at Roto Scouts on Twitter, and we'll do a much better job of this for you tomorrow. Projections are up on the site. Give me a few minutes. We'll have a full update for that Josh Giddey news. Later, gang.